All right, we are extremely lucky. We get to have a Q&A with Mr. Ken Greenberg, our mayor, the general manager of transportation, and the manager of current planning. So for a person like me, this is pretty much Christmas morning. I am not bringing my iPhone up here. I'm just going to give you the message, which is that let's pretend I'm keeping track of time officially. And what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to either make a short statement, tell a short story, or ask a question of the panel. You must keep it to 45 seconds, and I'm going to trust you. If I feel like you're going a little long, I'm just going to raise my hand. I'll just be bold. So Marco and Catherine, who I can't see, are walking around. They have microphones. Before I hand it over and I get my last 2 seconds with the mic, that Gardner Expressway, that rehabilitation under the highway, that is pretty awesome. When I did my degree in sociology, I read this great book, and it said, if you want to see a new city, you can go somewhere else, or you can just look at your city in a new way. So that's my preferred mode, is number 2. So I'm going to try my best. We have a beautiful panel. We have a beautiful night. We have 10 minutes. Or longer if we feel like it, and if there's volunteerism up here. So let's just get started. Does anybody have something to say or something to ask? Okay.
I've seen a tremendous amount of change in Edmonton in the last 5 years.
Can you just use the mic?
Oh. My voice carries anyways. I've seen a tremendous amount of change in Edmonton since 2006, where I decided to move to Vancouver, something that many young people do for the climate and seeming greater amenities available for sort of a career and lifestyle cyclist. I've come back. The employment prospects at that time weren't that great. I wasn't doing well money-wise. I came back home. And there's been so many wonderful changes in my hometown. I'm really amazed. How can we keep the ball rolling, I guess, through events like this? And what sort of... I keep imagining, while I'm delivering packages, I'm a bike messenger, how can we create, introduce new types of dense housing units in a city that really doesn't have that framework, that these do not seem like...
All right, I'm calling the 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Did I have...
So if you were going to summarize your question in maybe 3 words, is it how do we keep it going?
Post-war into density. Let's make a little arrow.
Changing into density.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I think you can free for all, Peter. I think you can go for whatever you want here.
Sure. There we go. Well, I sort of look at this in the layers that Ken was talking about, and the backbone system is LRT, the interwoven system is the bus system, and you activate development opportunities, and you can imagine places like Century Park, you can imagine what would happen over time at a place like Bonnie Doon, where we now know, as of yesterday's announcement, we'll be there in 2020. And so if you're the landowner at Bonnie Doon Mall, you're now thinking, okay, I have 5 years to think about what I might do differently with this building and, more importantly, this piece of land. And maybe it's 10 or 15 more years before you complete the comprehensive planning and put the density in there. But in the meantime, if you own an individual lot in Bonnie Doon, the zoning's already there to build skinny homes, to build duplexes, to build brownstones. And an individual small landholder can already start to anticipate that train coming. And even if you're not next to an imminent LRT station, we've tried to telegraph out where the trains are going to go. We're trying really hard to get funding from Minister Sohi to so that we can get line of sight to, okay, 7 years out, here's the next set of stations that are going to open, and maybe 10 to 12 years out, here's the next set, and your degree of specificity in terms of the timing might go down, but your sense that it's actually going to happen in our lifetimes goes up. And so people start making different planning decisions, different life cycle decisions about their properties and their land. And then even away from the train system, where you have transit avenues, and we're starting to do a lot of this work around the corridors in the city. You know, a place like White Avenue, even a place like 97th Street in the fullness of time, there's already pretty good transit there. If we can deliver frequent, reliable transit, we know that people will be more likely to choose it. And the more people overall in the city who can make the choice of being a one-car household, say, instead of a two-car household, all of a sudden they've just opened up maybe $500-600 a month worth of insurance, gas, car payments, depreciation, that they can put into either higher rent or a higher mortgage payment in exchange for a location advantage, or they can, you know, invest in their business or their education. But overall, if we can shift that expenditure pattern a little bit away from something that has a pretty low economic multiplier in our city, which is driving, to something that has a much higher economic multiplier in our city, like the things I mentioned, except going on vacation. Don't go on vacation with your savings, because then the money leaves. But if you spend it on real estate, if you in essence can afford to live closer to the action and then be part of the action and contribute to that street life and that vibrancy, you get this virtuous circle of wealth creation for not only the people who build your unit and who own your unit and rent it to you, but if you own the unit yourself, you just actually improved your savings plan for the long haul. So it's creating the conditions for the development to be there through the transportation infrastructure, and then through the zoning and everything else that we create. And we're doing a lot of work on our zoning bylaw from that neighborhood level, from skinny homes up to, we need to do some more work around the brownstone, because that's what I think is really missing in Edmonton. And we're going to build lots of them at Blatchford and hopefully prove that there is a market for them here in Edmonton. We'll build some lot by lot in Bonnie Doon and in other neighborhoods like that, and hopefully in my neighborhood over time, because I live close to a train station, and that's what I'd like to see in my neighborhood. Not all of my neighbors agree, but it's what the Belgravia ARP says, so it shall be.
Any follow-up thoughts, or should we move on to another one? Yeah. Okay. I'm depending on you, Marco, and I just can't see anything. Who's got the mic? Okay, very good, awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Hi, this is for Mr. Greenberg. The gardener. I hadn't realized you were complicit in saving it. And I guess since we've got you here, I'd like to nail you and ask, why didn't you just be creative and rip it down? I think of San Francisco, which had the equivalent Embarcadero, which cut off the rest of the city from the waterfront. Caltrans said it had to stay. The planners said it had to stay, and the people said, by plebiscite, it had to go. And we've never looked back. It's a fantastic space. Thank you.
So, excellent question. Is the mic on?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. There are two sides to the Gardner. There's what we call the East Gardner, where I am on record as advocating taking it down, where that can happen. It may not happen because of some politics recently, but it's not over till it's over. This section in the west is different. It cannot come down. It's sitting, as you probably saw in the images, right on top of Fort York. And it's running right between a number of residential buildings that have been built right up to its edges. So it is just physically not possible anymore. The die was cast some time ago to take this section of the Gardner down. About a little further to the east, when you start to get over to Yonge and York Street, yes, absolutely, it can come down. But the only way to take this down, and it may someday happen, would be an extraordinarily expensive tunneling operation. And even if you were to do that, the ramps that would be required to access the Gardner would do far more damage than harm. So the idea of taking the Gardner down is the right one in the right place, but it couldn't happen here.
Okay. Yes.
Hey, I got one here.
Got one?
Yeah, right back here. To follow up on the gentleman's first question, how to keep the ball rolling, the city has recently got into the land development game. So how do you incentivize developers to build at TODs at Belvedere, Commonwealth Stadium, potentially the new, Rexall Place? How do you force, I don't want to say force, but how do you get developers to build developments there instead of spreading them out past the Henday like they're doing now?
I'll take that one on. We have, in fact, just concluded, it's not complete, but we've come to an arrangement with a developer from Calgary who's very interested in creating a market for the company in infill in the city of Edmonton. And they saw an opportunity that married up with some work that we had started, I think, 2007 and 2008. And it was around where's the best location outside of the downtown, because the downtown, for me, is our best TOD, and it will be for a long time. But that location is in the area of the old Matart lumber yard, which is by the stadium station LRT. And it's about a 6 to 7 acre site. And the commitment from both sides was that the developer, which I'll mention is Brookfield, from Calgary, bought the site from Matart. And that was on the understanding that there would be a future partnership with the city of Edmonton. Council then, and I think over a couple of different councils, the idea went back and forth as to whether we might be able to implement it. But I think there was a very bold step in the last capital budget, and we were getting to the point where the amount of money that council had to play with on the capital side was getting whittled down, But we had approximately $9 million left of money that was available in what we call pay-as-you-go. And then there was some additional money out of the CRL, which for some of you may have heard is the money that's being created in certain parts of the city. Downtown is one, the quarters is another. And in fact, the quarters CRL extends far enough east to capture most of this site. The point, though, is that the city took the bold step through council's approval of a capital budget to partner with Brookfield on what we considered the second best TOD. And it was a pilot in many ways to demonstrate what we could do through design, which included that we created a new main street that connected Jasper Avenue, roughly in the alignment of 84th Street, and then connected over to Stadium Station. For us, that area of the city, while it had been redeveloped from housing into some 3-story walk-ups, and we're starting to see some other development along Jasper Avenue, it really had a lot of unlocked potential. And I think that the work that the administration did in presenting that unlocked potential and a business case around why that made sense to go after that development was accepted in part. It was also accepted by the developer. And the step that we still need to complete is we're going to take a direct control zoning, which will see 1,000 housing units on that 6-acre site. We'll see a main street. We'll see some street-level residential. And very importantly, we'll see a piece of infrastructure that connects Jasper Avenue and Stadium and really provides a wonderful opportunity for all those people that live on the other side of the LRT tracks to enjoy the rec center. But it was singling out that particular opportunity as a pilot, and hopefully from that, learning an experience with a developer as a partner, and then from there, working on other opportunities that we might grow this ethic of see what a TOD can look like through a partnership, and then go to other sites. But for us, that's where it can start.
Just want to supplement that one, which is there's a lesser evil argument, and then there's a how do we actually make what we want to see happen on the infill side actually happen. And the lesser evil argument is if we don't do it, the counties will, and they'll do it at even lower density, and they'll do it even further out. And I'm not saying that we should just carry on the way we have because of that, but the reason why that's a real challenge is that we haven't had coherent regional planning for a really long time, since the planning commissions were disbanded and since the counties were given the opportunity to behave like urbans but with an unlimited landmass. That led to some extremely undisciplined growth decisions all over this province, especially in our fragmented region. And so part of what changed that in Ontario was the smart growth legislation where not just as a region, but from up above at the province, they said, thou shalt not do that anymore. You have to make some responsible decisions. And we're actually closer to that, though without it being imposed the same way from the province, We're closer to that than we think through the Capital Region Board Growth Plan, which is now approaching 5 years old. And it doesn't say thou shalt not grow all over the place, but it does at least start to raise the bar by saying if you're going to grow, you have to do it in these areas. It has to be compact. It has to be contiguous with the existing development, i.e. you can't start a whole other new town. And you have to do it at a certain level of density. And that's measured, it's understood what it is, and it's not quite, you know, urban density yet, but it's not the sprawl from 25 years ago where you had maybe 10 or 12 units per net residential hectare, which is a fancy way of saying if you subtract the roads and the parks and you just look at the lot area of the residential, you're looking at 10 to 12. You know, you look at a place like Twin Brooks, that's sort of typical, or Blue Quill, something like that, 1980s era, primarily detached residential subdivision of land. You go to the other side of the Henday south of Twin Brooks, or to lots of the other new neighborhoods, and you'll find a level of density 2, 3, 4 times that. And almost to the point where in some of those areas you can see the town centers developing, and if you interline the train to come there in the future, you can actually see a town center that has density, has an urban feel, has a grid of streets and all of those other things. And so I think we can approach this two ways. One, we can build better suburbs, and I think we're iterating that all the time, and our neighbors are being, and they want to too, actually. I think they want to do the right things. So they're iterating that, and as we do the new regional growth plan, we're looking at density targets, and even more importantly this round, we're looking at where should we not grow? Where does it make sense to preserve agricultural land? And you can't tackle that as the city of Edmonton alone. You have to have the region and ultimately the province, through some legislative changes, actually all agree to that. But that discussion's happening, which should provide you some reassurance that, you know, we care about the same question. But at the same time, even if we, if for some reason somebody, had a lightning bolt and could just say, stop all new suburban growth, if that happened tomorrow, even at the slower rates of growth we're seeing today, but especially the last couple of years, 20, 30,000 people show up, we are absolutely ill-equipped to handle that from an infill point of view. Our regulatory framework's not there. The market isn't there in terms of the people who produce it. There aren't enough mom and pop builders to build all the skinny homes and to build the duplexes, much less the towers that would need to be built. And you'd actually probably run out of land really, really fast. And then you'd be looking for nooks and crannies and redevelopment, and it would be glorious and chaotic and require a lot of innovation. But the point is that there's actually an awful lot of work that we need to keep doing on how do we make this possible? How do we feed it with good transit? What kind of zoning do we need to have in place? How can the city facilitate? What kind of public engagement and buy-in do you have to even get past the friggin' skinny homes discussion? You know, there's so much work we need to do to actually be able to accommodate more than 14% of the growth, which is I think what we accommodated last year by infill. Our municipal development plan says we got to get to 25. Well, that is a hard haul. So we got to do both. We have to build newer areas that are more urban, more dense, consume less land, are more vibrant, more economically efficient, more livable. And then we need to do it not on the best land if we're going to agree that we're going to protect that. We then have to have tools to protect it. And at the same time, we need to make infill feasible, viable, desirable, attractive, well-serviced. And so we're trying to do both, and it's taking forever, but it's coming.
I think it's also worth noting that back to the very first question about what drives these changes, it is recognition that at a regional level, we're using too much land, and we need to come up with a more compact way of living. And in fact, the density targets that have been applied in the last iteration of the plan, and the one that the mayor we're talking about now is increasing the density targets, we're finding that our suburbs, where about 80% of our growth is growing, and that's the 60,000 people that have come to the city in the last 2 years, not the 100,000 that's coming to Toronto. But 80% of those folks are living or locating in the suburbs, because that's where we've got place to accommodate them. But the densities that are being achieved in those areas are in the mid-30s. They're 35, even up to 40 units per hectare. And that's a large contrast from some of the neighborhoods that aren't very far away from us right now. The downtown is at about 120 units per hectare, and that's really good. But neighborhoods only as far away as, say, Westmount or Spruce Avenue, they're actually below 25 units per hectare. And those are the areas that we think have great bones in terms of they're very walkable, they're highly permeated with ways to get around. They still have their high streets, which of course we're supporting through BRZ efforts, et cetera. But those are the places where we'd like to see that infrastructure that's been there for, in some cases, up to 100 years. Yes, we're slowly rehabilitating that, but those are the places where we want more people to locate and to be able to take the pressure off the edge of the city, and where up to 80% of the people are now locating.
No, you sure, Dorian?
You know,
You might miss your chance.
Sure. Well, you did. One of the first things you asked, or in your question, was around TODs around Clairview and Belvedere, and we've recently started having some conversations around Clairview with the developers have assembled some land, and we started looking at it. Not this is your side of the line, this is our side of the line. How do we? What are you going to do over there? But more having a conversation. What are we going to do together? One, to maximize value for the people who live there. How do we stop looking at this is our park and ride, and what do you want to do over there? How do we maybe jointly integrate some of our park and ride uses with retail, commercial? Could you imagine something like in Century Park, where at full build out there's a main level retail, grocery store, convenience store, second, third floor parking for some sort of park and ride facility, and student housing on the next 4 floors up, something like that. And so we've been starting to have a few conversations with developers of what does that look like? Is that attractive to you? How do we maximize value for both of us? So I think those are opportunities to, at some of those point locations to do better.
Thanks. So I will note that we have gone over time. Thank you. To wrap it up neatly, though, I will ask the last question. It'll be tight. There's a million reasons to care about design. The 4 of you have said so many different ones, but if you were just going to pick one, and it's not your favorite, it's just one that's germane, just to leave us with, why do you care about urban design? And Peter, we'll start with you, and we'll move down to Ken.
Well, I recognize that scale is what Ken talked about, and in my experiences, I've tended to look scale at a very personal level. It's what I'm able to experience when I travel. But I think the other scale, and we've touched upon it, is a sense of the region. And that's, for me, as a planner and thinking about the hierarchy of plans, that's where we need to get that right in terms of design. And that is, and where we're working right now, is a metropolitan-based plan, where we recognize that the core of the metropolitan area is actually the downtown of the city of Edmonton and what we call the mature neighborhood areas around it, and that they are the areas that provide the greatest amenity. They're going to have a hockey rink just outside. They've got a good part of the river valley. We have a number of different rec centers. Of course, we've got the great downtown that's coming along. And then from there, there's a metropolitan area. When you combine the two, that's our footprint for the next 30 to 40 years. The area that we're supposed to concentrate very purposely through that design, our population and our growth, and our investment in infrastructure, including transit, so that people can get around that area. And then outside of that area, the area that we should not sprawl into in terms of that plan is the area that's going to be reserved in large part for agriculture, agricultural lifestyle, and not to forget agriculture in terms of the economics of it. So for me, in terms of that far end of the scale, getting that design right, which can help the city thrive, the urban areas around it to thrive, and then at the same time protect our agriculture, protect our watersheds, protect our rivers by concentrating in growth in certain areas. And then of course, when we do concentrate, we've got to make sure that we have all of the amenities that support people living in smaller spaces.
For me, the most important thing is the outcome, which for me is about creating vibrancy, creating energy, creating life in a city. So the physical infrastructure that we build is inanimate. I'm actually a firm believer that if you build it, there's a chance that people might not come if you don't do it right. Been there, lived it, done it, built it. Hey, wait, where's everybody? But I think the design by incorporating not only just the physical urban spaces and infrastructure, but engaging communities, engaging the private sector, looking at what is the right level of government investment into kickstarting and spurring something till it becomes sustainable. That's for me that holistic view at the front end is how do you create something that is alive at the end of it and is sustainable and it's got vibrancy and energy. Because that's what makes cities real and that's what makes cities special. And there's so many ways that you can do it wrong by not being holistic at the front end, and you end up with a naked street at the end of it. So that's why it's important to me.
Well, I was thinking a little bit about Olmsted's drainage system integration, and because we were talking about this a little bit at the executive committee today, and I'm coming to the question. Because we have these lakes that are actually what we call stormwater management facilities. And when you say they're stormwater management facilities, people go, ooh, I don't know if I want to live next to that. But they're water features, and they're the most expensive real estate in the new subdivisions because people want to back onto them. And so we're proposing to put 2 stormwater management facilities, or water features, depending how you want to characterize them, at Blatchford. And we were debating today a little bit whether we should put a 3rd in that's a swimming lake. And that wasn't really the issue. There was some confusion. People thought we were getting rid of all of the lakes and all of the water. And once again, people said, we've been betrayed by City Council because they're totally changing the deal. And of course, the reason people thought that is because something inaccurate was reported, which never happens. That never happens. But thinking about something like Blatchford, which has all these different moving pieces, and thinking about the fact that these water features are really, really important for the livability of the space. They're really important for the resiliency of the space from a water management point of view. They give you infrastructure efficiency because you don't have to size the pipes to move all of the stormwater away all at once. You can time the release of them. There's integration in all of that, and I think that's the value of really, really good design. And there are 4 principles behind the ways. We talk all about the ways all the time, and we trip over the way we move, the way we prosper, and then they're all different. They're all different ways. And then what really, the magic is those times when we can, and I think, Ken, your metaphor was beautiful, that when you strike a chord with them, you're not just hitting one note at a time. You're not just doing the way we move, and you're not just doing the way we green. You're somehow bringing those 2 together and bringing it all together. So there are 4 principles behind the ways, and they're livability, sustainability, and innovation, none of which you can achieve without integration. And yet we talk precious little about the importance of integration at the city in the work that we do. And if we talked about that more, I think we'd get much better design outcomes.
So just as we say that all politics is local, I would say that all urban design ultimately is personal. And what I mean by that is it quite literally affects the way we live our lives every day. So I'm going to end kind of where the mayor started, talking about his neighborhood and walking his son to school and the patio in front of his house, and just tell another simple story. I had the great good fortune to work with Jane Jacobs on a number of things, and back in the 90s when Barbara Hall was the mayor of Toronto, she did what mayors sometimes do. She called a bunch of people, including me, and said, okay, I won the election, what should I do? And this mayor didn't call me. And she also called Jane Jacobs, and we got together with a small group of people, and we sat in her office, and we had a kind of brainwaves. We said in 1961, when Jane wrote Death and Life of Great American Cities, one of the ideas that she put forward was the harm that land use planning does in separating things and the benefits of mixing things. So we hatched a radical scheme which was on 400 acres of land on both sides of downtown, something called the Kings, King Spadina and King Parliament. We would eliminate land use zoning altogether, and we would go to a form-based zoning code. And in these warehouse districts that had been the economic powerhouse of Toronto at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, which were being torn down for parking lots, we would see what happened if we let life come back and let market forces play out. Well, at a big scale, if you look at statistics, what has happened is fascinating. which is not only have we added tens of thousands of people living in those areas and billions of dollars of investment, but funnily enough, there are more people working there than ever did at the height of the industrial era, which is kind of astonishing, but when you think about the new economy, it makes sense. So the personal part of it is, sometime after that, my wife and I moved into one of the first new buildings to be built after that plan came into effect in the King Spadina area. And one of the greatest pleasures we have is similar to what the mayor was describing, which is watching day by day, week by week, month by month, new businesses come in, new neighbors arrive, new things happening, new relations forming, to the point where we can't think of anything in our daily lives that we can't walk to within 5 minutes. And seeing all that emerge over a period of time, which is the direct outcome of a policy change in the city, has just been unbelievably gratifying. So it goes from these policies that we talk about all the time with Latin words to what people actually experience every day. And we either make things easier or more difficult. That's what it comes down to. And so I think I am in the best profession anyone could imagine. And just seeing this unfold is immensely satisfying.
Well, I would really like to thank our guests, all four of them, and our co-hosts. Thank you very much.